Hello, everyone. First, Ivan, I would like to thank you and the rest of the organizers for the opportunity to make this online lecture. It is a new way to communicate, but I think it's very interesting, and we can make this huge international meeting. And so this is a great opportunity to present our site, our archaeological site, to all of you. So dear colleagues, dear friends and guests, today I will make a presentation dedicated to an early Byzantine monastery located in the suburbs of Varna on the Black Sea coast. This is a very important site, one of the most important in the region of Varna. And together with my colleague from the Varna Regional Museum of History, Alexander Minchev, we have been excavating this monastery for many years. During 6 of those years, we have been working also with the Balkan Heritage Foundation, organizing an international field school, archaeological field school. And I can say that this cooperation is very successful. And with my colleague Alexander Minchev, we hope that after the end of the pandemic, we will resume our cooperation and we will continue with the field school in the future. So what exactly is this site that I'm going to talk about? This is a Christian monastery. It was constructed, it was built around the middle of the 5th century AD, and it existed until the first decades of the 7th century. It was destroyed together with the nearby city of Odessos in the first decades of 7th century as a result of a very serious barbarian invasions in the region. Invasions that actually destroyed the ancient civilization of the region for good. So here on the slide, by the way, do you see the arrow on the screen? Ivan?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay, because I want to use it, yeah. So on the screen, you can see a general view of the site. It's a picture from a drone. You can see here in the middle, these are the walls of the church, and around it are the foundations of different buildings and courtyards that are actually part of this big monastery complex. So if we have in mind the historical timeline and the historical periods for this particular part of Europe and the Balkans, we can call the monastery early Christian and also early Byzantine, because this part of the Balkans in the period in question was actually part of the Eastern Roman Empire or Byzantium. So now let me give you some information about the geographical characteristics of the region and the historical topography. I think that this can help you to build a picture in your mind about the site in its natural setting, let's say. So the site is located near Varna. As you can see here, this is on this map of the Balkans. The white arrow is pointing to the location of present-day Varna. This is the same location as that of ancient Odessos. What is this city of Odessos? Today's Varna is the 3rd biggest city in Bulgaria and the biggest on the Bulgarian Black Sea coast. Under the central part of Varna, the so-called Greek neighborhood, are the ruins of medieval Varna, and underneath the ruins of the ancient city of Odessos. This was a Greek colony, a polis, founded in the 2nd quarter of the 6th century BC. And because it was a harbor, seaport. Because of the sea trade, throughout the whole ancient period, Odessos remained a very important and flourishing city. It was initially an independent city-state, and then it became part of the Roman Empire. Here on the slide, you can see a picture of the biggest Roman monument in Varna. This is a bathhouse, the Roman Therme of Odessus from the 2nd century, a good illustration about the importance of Odessus in the Roman and late Roman period. So after the beginning of the 4th century, Odessus became a Christian center, a see of a bishop, then an archbishop. Of course, they started to build different churches and monastery in the city and in its vicinities. And in the middle of the 5th century, they built this monumental monastery not far from the city of Odessus. Now look at the map. Let's go back to the mid-5th century. Imagine that all this modern city, of course, is not there, and we have only the ancient Odessus. Look at this yellow circle. This is the ancient city of Odessus, very close to the beach. And now, what do we have southward from the city? We have the sea. This is the Bay of Varna. This is the Lake of Varna. And here between them, there used to be a lowland. It's a marshy area with a small river that was running from the lake to the Bay of Varna. And through this same area was passing a very important ancient road, the so-called Via Pontica, or the Pontic Road, that used to connect the delta of the Danube River with the Bosphorus. And the road was running like this, and then near a hill here. This is actually the first hill opposite from the city, on the other side of this marshy area. This is the hill that now we call Janavara, but this is a relatively new name. Unfortunately, we don't know the original name of this hill. So on the northern slope of this hill, on a level terrace, the people of Odessos built the monastery that we know as the Janavara Monastery, after the modern name of the hill. The place was and still is wonderful, and the architects, the founders of the monastery, chose it very carefully. And because when they erected this huge church and the complex around it, this facility, it dominated the whole area. It was visible from everywhere because this was on the first hill. It was visible from the city of Odessos, but also from the whole area of the city, from the lake, from the sea, from the ships coming to the harbor. And the facility was dominating the area, but not only in geographical terms. It was dominating the area also in spiritual terms. Because imagine this church built there on the green hilltop. It was like a kind of, figuratively speaking, like a lighthouse. Now the area of Janavara is with forest, but this is a very young forest. It was planted in the early 20th century. Before that, this was an open space, an open area, and from there you can see the whole area. So here comes the question: why they built this most monumental Christian monument of Odessos right there on this hilltop? What was the purpose? Was it just to make a fancy dwelling place for the local monks? It's hardly believable because it's not just an ordinary monastery. It's a big question, actually. And the recent archaeological discoveries, together with an amazing discovery from the early 20th century probably can give us the key to this mystery, the function, the original function of the complex of Janavara. Now, let's move to the other topic. This year in Varna, we celebrate a very important anniversary. 120 years from the foundation of the Varna Archaeological Society. It's a big celebration, big anniversary. Actually, this is the official birthday of the Varna archaeology. And the foundation of this society was connected with two very special scholars and teachers, the Scorpio brothers, Herman and Karel. They were of Czech origin, but they came in the late 19th century to Bulgaria, and they remained here. They started to teach and to develop science. And we may say that they are the fathers of not only the Varna archaeology, but the archaeology in many other regions of Bulgaria. One of the first achievements of the society was to found officially the Varna Archaeological Museum. And also they explored a lot of archaeological sites. Among them was the Janavara Monastery. Actually, one of the two brothers, Herman Scorpio, was the man who discovered the monastery and conducted the first excavations in the early 20th century. Here, I would like to show you some pictures from this early period of exploration of the site. This is Herman Scorpio during the excavations, and he considered this site so important, such a big thing in his career, that it is not surprising that when he passed away in the 20s, he was buried not elsewhere, but near the ruins of Janavara. And on this picture, you can see the church. And this monument, this is the tombstone of Scorpio. Another picture, several decades later. This monument still stands there near this amazing archaeological site. So in the following minutes, I would like to present to you the major results from the first excavations that took place between 1915 and 1923. So Herman Scorpio excavated only the church. In fact, he made some test trenches around the church. He found some walls, well, sections of walls, and he created this theory that the church was part of a monastery. But for many decades, this remained only a theory. The results of the first excavations were connected mainly with the church itself. On the screen, you can see a virtual partial reconstruction of the church of Janavara. You can see that it has a very old ground plan. In fact, this is one of the mysteries of the site. We still cannot solve this mystery because this church, in fact, doesn't have any exact parallel in the world. There are parallels of different architectural features. Most of these parallels are from the Near East, from the Christian Roman provinces in the Near East and Asia Minor. There are even some, let's say, parallels here in the Balkans, very rare. But we don't have even a single example of a church built following the same architectural plan. So this is a big mystery. This is a big question, and we still cannot say why the architects created this church in such a way. There are different theories, influences from the Near East, foreign architectural influences, experiments, or even there is a very brave theory that the church was fortified. I mean, it was built as a combination of a church and a fortress. Great, very fancy theory, but it would be the only such case in the Balkans. So that's why it's only a theory. To my personal opinion, most probably this was a kind of architectural experiment. In the late 5th and 6th century, we have several examples like this. The architects were experimenting with different elements, with different types of ceiling, domes, arches, and stuff. So probably this was one of the reasons. But this question remains open. So when Scorpio excavated the church, he found a lot of interesting things. For example, look at the plan. What do we have as architecture? We have the central part of the church, the nave, is pretty simple. This is a single nave church set with its long axis east-west. The altar is facing east. There is an apse here behind the altar. This is the altar area, the nave. This is a simple narthex or a vestibule, and this is the main entrance. But there are 4 chambers or 4 rooms attached to the 4 corners of the church. You see these 4 rooms. And because the walls are very thick, and because there are stairs here, and we found remains of another one here, we can say that this building was pretty tall, with at least 1 upper level, probably more. Also, we suspect with my colleagues that above the side chambers, there were more floors, so they were like towers. So in 3 of these chambers, Scorpio found beautiful floor mosaics. They're still intact, in situ, and they're in a pretty good state. You can see an example of one of the mosaics. This is a painted copy of the mosaic. By the way, this is not a picture of the original mosaic, but a painted copy. So in the other chamber and in the third. Probably one good day with Balkan Heritage Foundation, we can reopen the mosaics and restore them and conserve them. But this is for the future. The 4th chamber functioned as a baptistery here. And in the middle of the floor, there was a special baptismal font constructed. This is a reconstruction here. And you can see a picture from our excavations from 2007, as I remember. The font was in the shape of a cross, and in 2 of the arms, here and here, there were steps to go down and up. You can see remains of the steps here and here. What did Scorpio find in the nave of the church? This is a picture from the first excavation. He found a lot of marble elements from the interior decoration of this part of the building. For example, he found the base of the altar screen. You can see here the base, made of big marble blocks. He also found plates, pillars, small columns, and other elements from the construction of the chancel or the altar screen. He found the altar area with a synthronon or the bench for the priests in the apse here. He also found the base of an ambo or pulpit in the middle of the nave here. You can look at this plan too. This is the base of the altar screen, the remains of the synthronon, and in this area was the base of the pulpit. A virtual reconstruction here. And now we're approaching the most amazing discovery in Janavara. It was in an underground structure, very sophisticated structure, a combination of a tomb, two additional chambers, and a crypt for relics. If you look at the plan, you can see one of the chambers, another chamber, the crypt under the altar, and a tomb under the ambo or the pulpit. Now, I want to give you some information about the geology of the site because it is directly connected with this underground structure. Millions of years ago, the whole area of Varna was a seabed, was underwater, and that's why there are layers of limestone, sandstone, and between them there are caverns or like pockets with sea sand. This is something very specific for the whole area. And one pocket of sand like this was right under the middle of the nave. This of course, cannot be a coincidence. And with my colleagues, we are sure that when they were looking for the place for the new construction, they found this specific phenomenon and they used the spot to build the church, and the cavern with sand was used to build this underground structure in it. How exactly this happened? They made a hole in the upper layer of limestone. It was like a small well. They get down to the cavern with sand. They took out part of the sand, and in the cavity that was formed, they built all these things with bricks and stones. The layer of limestone under the floor is approximately 1 meter thick. And on this picture, you can see this layer. This is the floor here. And here, the layer of limestone ends and starts the cavern with sand. This is not a theory. I've seen this sand with my own eyes. And this is real sea sand. So when they removed part of the sand, they constructed the tomb, the crypt, and everything. The only access to this underground structure was through an opening in the floor that was sealed with stones and a marble slab. This is important to note because it was sealed. When the church was destroyed, all this remained there intact for centuries. So Scorpio got down in the first chamber, and from there, so from here, from this spot, on the western side, he found a completely preserved tomb. Inside of the tomb, he found two coffins of an adult, actually an elder male, and the other one was not a real coffin, but a box with bones of a younger individual. We don't know the names of those people, but for sure they were very important members of the local Christian community. They could be the founders, they could be members of the clergy. We don't know, but in any case, they were very important because the Christians, the local Christians, made their tomb right there under the middle of the church, and in very close proximity to the most holy place, to the holiest place, the crypt with the relics, which was right there under the altar. By the way, this man, this is Alexander Minchev, my colleague, and he's taking pictures in the tomb. We reopened it several years ago. And this is the crypt, made of bricks and mortar. It was closed according to the Scorpio descriptions with a marble slab. And inside, here inside, he found reliquaries, a set of 3 reliquaries, intact for centuries and centuries. First, he found a marble box in the shape of a sarcophagus. When he opened it, inside of it, like those Russian dolls, he found a second box, again in the shape of a sarcophagus, but this time made of silver, this second box. Pieces of decomposed organic matter on top of the silver lid. This was an evidence that the box was wrapped in fabric, probably silk. By the way, Ivan, we still have pieces of this fabric in the museum. The pieces were sealed in a jar, and I think we can make an analysis of this.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm afraid to open it because if I open the jar, probably the oxygen can destroy it, but it is sealed. So I think some analysis can be made. So inside of the silver box, Scorpio found a third one, a gold box decorated with semi-precious stones. And inside of it, he found pieces of bones, pieces of relics of an unknown, but obviously very, very much venerated saint. We gave samples of these relics to a laboratory in Oxford. Unfortunately, the results are inconclusive because the pieces are very small. Specialists said that the bones were from the period, I mean from 4th or 5th century. They belonged to a male, but that was it, nothing more, unfortunately. They came with their special costumes and tools and stuff. They took the samples, and we expected great results, but unfortunately, this is the only information that we were able to retrieve from the bones. So here you can see a picture of some members of the Archaeological Society when they discovered the reliquaries. Here they are on the table, and officially they opened them and showed the relics to the public. If you come to Varna, you can see the boxes. They are still in our museum with the relics inside of them, and they're exhibited in one of our treasury rooms. So this was an amazing discovery, really amazing. Especially these gold reliquaries. This is until now the biggest preserved gold reliquary from the early Christian period. Worldwide, and a very expensive set of boxes, so we can guess that this saint was very important. Judging by the style of the boxes, especially the gold one, we think that the relics were brought to Odessus from the Near East, from Syria or from some of the provinces in Asia Minor. Unfortunately, we don't have any idea who this saint could be. It could be a martyr, it could be an apostle, it could be a bishop. We don't know. We don't have a name. We hope every year to find an epigraphic monument with a name, but for now, nothing. The thing that we can say for certain is that this saint was extremely important, and when they brought the relics to Odessus, they constructed a special facility to venerate it. It became a kind of pilgrimage destination, and they built this facility not somewhere, but on this very prominent spot on top of the Janavara hill. So this saint actually, we can assume that he was venerated in a kind of divine, as a kind of divine protector of Odessus and the whole area. Well, there is a big, how to say, there is, it's more or less an assumption, but we can say that this is an educated guess. So we think that this is the reason why they built the complex there, to house the relics. That's why they chose the spot. They chose the exact place without covering with sand. They constructed the facility, they sealed it, and they created this sacred destination, the church on Janavara Hill. So now we will move to the other part of our story, because actually the story around Janavara is pretty interesting and with a lot of twists. So after the discovery, all the documentation was organized, and together with information for many more Christian sites, all this was sent to a very famous Byzantologist. You know him. This is Thomas Whitmore, the one who was connected with the restoration of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople and many other Byzantine sites. The man who founded the Byzantine Institute of America. So this scholar was a friend of Karol Scorpio, the other from the Scorpio brothers. So Karol Scorpio wrote a book about Christian monuments from the sea, from the Black Sea country of Bulgaria, this area. So he put together information about a lot of churches, monasteries, and other archaeological sites. He wrote this book, and he sent the manuscript to Whitmore to be published in USA. All the documentation with a lot of pictures, plans, etc., all this was sent to him. But for different reasons, this edition never happened. I mean, this book was never published. Then Scorpio passed away, then Whitmore passed away, and the archives, the manuscript, remained in USA, and some parts of this, some photos were also in Paris for decades and decades. We managed to retrieve, we in Bulgaria, we managed to retrieve the manuscript partly, not before the 70s, with great efforts. And for a very long period, the site of Janavara actually remained unpublished, and most of the detailed information about the site actually was like lost because of this story. That's why the monument, not the monument, sorry, the site of Janavara gradually was like forgotten. I mean, the people just stopped to go there because there was no information about it. And this continued until the very end of the 20th century, when my colleague Alexander Minchev decided to resume the excavation with one specific goal: to recover through secondary excavation the lost information from the first project of Hermann Scorpio. So he started with small test trenches in the premises with the mosaics, and then in the middle of the church. And then this happened in 1997. And then at a certain point, I graduated from university and joined him. And here we are in the Baptistery in 2007. And then our project started to grow bigger and bigger. Then the Balkan Heritage came, join us. And during the last years, actually, we have a pretty big excavation project. We have this international archaeological school. A lot of colleagues come to help us. Here on this photo, you can see Minchev. This is Dr. Orlin McElfatrick from Great Britain. This is a colleague of mine, an archaeologist from Sofia, Alexander Manev. This is me here. And the rest are students from all around the world. We have from USA, from Canada, from Australia, from China, from France, from India. and many other countries. And gradually, Janavara became an international archaeological site. And it's great because it's not just archaeological training there. We are making real archaeology with our students. We discover things. We make real archaeological discoveries. And now let's go back to the excavation. Until this last campaign, we knew only about the church itself. And now, with our recent excavation, we started to explore the complex that was around the church. We proved with certainty the theory of Scorpio that the church was not just standing there on the hill, but it was surrounded by a complex of buildings and courtyards, and that it functioned as a real monastery. And now I will give you some information about the architectural periods and about the structure of this complex. Forgive me about the quality of this handmade sketch. Currently, we are working on the full reconstruction of the site, but because the work is not completed, that's why I draw this, just to give you some idea about the original complex. This is the first period of the complex of Janavara. So from our excavations, because of our excavations, we know that the complex had several construction phases. The first one, the original one, actually in that phase, there was only a church and two courtyards. That's it. So it was hardly a monastery in the first period, in the first phase. And we think that in that original phase, it was more like a place for veneration of the relics of that saint. It was like a pilgrimage destination, like a shrine of this saint. We have the church. This is an atrium in front of the western facade, and there is a wall surrounding the other three facades of the church and protecting the building. In this original phase, everything was perfectly constructed, perfectly built. I mean, the proportions, the material, the blocks, the quality of the mortar, the marble details, the columns, the walls, everything was extremely symmetrical, extremely correctly made, well measured, and built with high quality. We don't know who was the founder of the complex and who gave the money, but one thing is certain, that this was an extremely expensive building, and I don't believe that the city and the local Christian community, even the bishop himself, could give so much money for this. So probably it was sponsored by the state, by the emperor, but this is just an idea. We don't have a proof for this. Anyway, this is the first period, but then, and this happened very soon after the initial construction of the complex, it started to grow. They started to build more and more buildings attached to the original structure. And this is a plan of the excavated area. And actually, it's from 2018. So this is second to last season of excavations. Now we have some more parts in this area and in this area. And we have walls going southward from the complex. So we assume that it is even bigger, especially on the southern side. So in a period not more than a century, that original complex was transformed into a bigger complex with more buildings, with more courtyards. They built a water supply system. They built sewers also. We have at least two different ceramic pipes for fresh water, and we have several sewers. We found a small latrine also here in this area. So we are certain that from a purely pilgrimage site, like a kind of martyrium, it was transformed into a real place for living, for the monks and for the people who were maintaining the facility. So here you can see the area, this area. This was the atrium with the colonnade. And this is the original wall here. But then they started to put additional walls, creating different small buildings. Some of them were used for storage food, olive oil, and wine, of course. We have a big number of pithoi, or the big jars for grain and for wine, set in the ground in this backyard here. So we can say that this site around the church was used for the everyday life. And the forecourt, the atrium, was used for more official occasions, because this was the main entrance. The main access was from here. So they built here a two-story building, some additional structures here. And last year, we found another courtyard in this area. And we can say by the finds, the small finds there, that it was an open space, and it was used for the maintenance of the monastery. Probably they were supplying the complex from there with food and other things. And as I said, we are certain now, after the last season, that the complex continues in southern direction, now under the New Forest. Some pictures from the monastery. This is the two-story building, a very interesting part of the site, very well preserved. Of course, the building was collapsed, but we found a very clear stratigraphy. It's like a sandwich. We have remains from burnt wood from the beams of the floor. We have ceramic tiles that were on the floor, on the second floor. And then we have wood from the roof, and we have roof tiles, and all this like a sandwich. And it's a great part of the site, and it's like a manual in archaeology for our students, to show them how to read the layers. So it's here in this area. So this is one of the sewers with two arms here. Here you can see one of the pipes. There another one in other part of the site. Some of the premises, we find very often repairs. We find doors sealed with masonry, other doors that were opened additionally. We find plaster on different layers, so it was plastered. The walls were plastered several times. We find a lot of coins and other small finds on the floor. So it's a very, very rich site. And here I would like to show you some of our finds. I chose these pictures because they are an illustration about the everyday life. Because we are certain that in the beginning, the function of the complex were purely religious. It was not a monastery, but very soon it became one. And so that's why we find so many finds that are connected with the everyday life. We find lamps like these, a lot of lamps, a lot of pottery. We find, these are interesting. These pieces are for fishing. See, hooks, and this is lead, and this is for a fisherman net. This is a small amphora with a cross. We find a lot of pottery with crosses or other Christian symbols. Some metal finds. This is for agriculture, you see. We have a lot of keys, like this one, from the doors. A lot of glass. Most of the glass pieces were actually from glass oil lamps, used not only in the church but also in the houses around it. This is a fibula, a very beautiful one. And now I would like to show you some interesting finds from our recent excavation seasons. And these finds are connected also with our cooperation with the Balkan Heritage Foundation. You know probably that Balkan Heritage Foundation organizes, together with several museums, an exhibition, temporary exhibition. It is presented, now we will make it actually in Blagoevgrad, and it was in Sofia. Before that it was in Sozopol, and in summer hopefully this exhibition will come to Varna. So in this exhibition are presented interesting finds from joint projects of Balkan heritage with different museums, and the stress is on finds that have been restored with the help of Balkan heritage. So here I can show you several objects restored in this way. These are very interesting ceramic vessels. The picture is from the process of restoration. Now they are completely restored. The shape is very strange and very rare. Obviously, it's a kind of local fashion. And we have more than 10 pieces found in that two-story building. Another interesting piece is this vessel, marble vessel for holy water, decorated with an inscription on the rim. It is an inscription containing a name of a certain Karelos. This Karelos, this is interesting, we know him from other epigraphic sources. He was a very prominent Byzantine man. He was a military officer, and we know that he was for a time in Constantinople. Then he went with the army to Western Europe, and then obviously in his last years he retired in Odessos. We don't know why. And we have several inscriptions with his name and information about him from Odessos. And now we know that he was one of the local Christians who gave a gift to the monastery. Probably he also gave money for the maintenance of the facility. So this is the vessel for holy water given by Karelos of Odessos in the 6th century AD. This piece is from an amphora imported from Alexandria in Egypt, and this is the inscription is with a code. And if you decode it, you can find the name of Maria. This is the Mother of God, Mary, and Christ. So obviously, this inscription was a votive inscription. But it is interesting that it was with a code, not just written, but um, hidden with this code. And at the end of my presentation, I would like to present to you this this face. This is a small terracotta fragment, a part of a terracotta figure that could be a mask or a bust. We don't know for sure. We found only this piece. The dating of this artifact should be in the 6th century. At least the style suggests this. And we think that probably this was a portrait of an emperor, or it could be a portrait of a certain saint, but more probably this is a portrait of an emperor. We show this everywhere in every conference, and we ask our colleagues for parallels, for ideas who this could be, because the terracotta figurines, you know, they were very widespread in antiquity, in Hellenistic period, then in Roman period, but in late antiquity and in Christian culture, they were not a thing. I mean, we don't have terracotta figurines from this period, or at least they're very rare. So I will ask you too, if you have any information that can help us to interpret this face from Janavara, the so-called emperor. So thank you for your attention, and I hope that my presentation was interesting for you. And now it's time for question and discussion. Thank you.
First, thank you very much, Vassil. I would like to ask our attendees if they have questions. There are two ways to ask a question. First, in the chat room, you can set your message and question there, or just raising a hand, and I can give you a floor. Ask your question. I have a question regarding the end of the compound. Can you tell us more about the end of the Janavara compound in the early 7th century?
Well, I can tell you only the information that we have from the excavations. So the complex had several construction phases. Until now, we can distinguish 5 phases. So first, of course, the original one. Then we have 3 more in which the complex was growing and becoming a monastery, bigger and bigger monastery. The last construction phase of the monastery, which is number 4, note this number 4, was dated with coins that are of Emperor Phocas, and they are from the first decade of the 7th century. So in this period, or a little bit after, the complex was enlarged and repaired for the last time. Then everything was destroyed. We have a hiatus, we have an empty layer in many places. And then at a certain point in the 7th century, the first half of the 7th century, and not long after the destruction of the monastery, some people came back and built something on top of the ruins and in the ruins. And this is very confusing because they used the building material from the old buildings. They used the blocks, but they built everything in a with a very low quality. I mean, the walls were not even, no right angle in this new period. Also, the quality of life was very low. We have dugouts in the ruins. We have hearts in the dugouts made of pieces of broken pythoid, for example. we have pottery that was of the lowest possible quality of the period. And so we think that after the devastation of the monastery, after period number 4, some people came back, and we have two options here. Those people could be monks and in general Christians, and they probably restored the facility, of course, with not in the way it was before. I mean, it was far more humble, and we're not sure that the church was still functioning. But probably they just went back to this place because it was considered a holy place, and they continued to live for a while there as a humble Christian community. Option number 2, probably this was in the last phase, number 5. It was not a monastery at all, but it became just a kind of small settlement with small houses and dugouts made in the ruins of the former monastery. We still cannot date precisely the end of this period number 5, but we know from other sites in the area that Odessus itself, the city, was destroyed, devastated for good in the middle of the second decade of 7th century, which means that the city ceased to exist. But this doesn't mean that the people abandoned it completely. So we have evidence from different sites that some people remained in the area, and they continue to live for a while, probably for 10, 20, 30 years there. And gradually people abandoned it, and the ancient civilization completely stopped. And then new people, new ethnic groups came here with the Great Migration of people. And this happened in the second half of the 7th century. So this is the general picture, and this is the information that we have about the end of the complex.
Actually, the very last question is regarding the identity of the barbarians who destroyed the area. I will start from the bottom up. I mean, the questions that were in the chat room, that are in the chat room. So, because you already mentioned the barbarians, or the people who destroyed and devastated the whole area, not only the monastery. Can you tell us more about their identity? And if, as far as I remember, there were these avar arrows and other type of arrows that you discovered back then in 2010. Can you tell us more about this?
So first, I have to say that I'm not a specialist in those barbarian cultures. I know that in our meeting now there are far better specialists. So I will show you the material. The official narrative, historical narrative, is that in the late 6th century, Avars and Slavs started to attack consistently, almost every year, to attack this northeastern part of the Balkan Peninsula. And eventually this led to the destruction of not only the facilities and the small settlements that were in the countryside, but also the big cities, including the city of Odessos, that used to be pretty well fortified, by the way. And we don't have precise information about the date of the destruction from the city itself, but we have from neighboring sites and small fortresses around Odessos. So the information from there is that in, if I remember correctly, in 614, this happened in 614. So this was the last invasion that destroyed the city. About the monastery, because it was a smaller, of course, facility and not so well fortified. Probably it was devastated earlier, but as I said, we have coins from Phokas, so it should happen after it. Now I will show you the material. Wait a second. Oop. Yeah, this is one of the arrows here. We have several, probably we have around 10 found in different parts of the site. And they are with 3 edges. And actually, all of the arrows that we have are of this type. There are not many, and all of them are of this type. And then this fibula. Actually, we have only few fibulae from the site, and this is the only one that can be connected with some barbarians. The rest are connected with Christianity for sure, because on the back of the fibula there is an inscription, Menas, Saint Menas.
Here comes the next question. Is there evidence of a cottage industry of souvenirs from pilgrimage to this site? Some of your finds look like the sort of things pilgrims might bring back from a visit: pottery, crosses, etc. Yeah, this is the question.
Until now, we don't have any piece of evidence that any of these pieces were produced in the monastery itself. So they could be brought there from pilgrims or from by pilgrims or by monks, brought from other places. So for now, we don't have any evidence. The only actually artifacts that could be produced in the monastery, because they're very specific and there are many, are these vessels. Where are they? Just a second. Yeah, these vessels.
And another question, has the full manuscript been recovered from United States?
Sorry?
Was the manuscript belonging to Karol Scorpio been obtained from United States?
I mean, the whole manuscript.
The full manuscript.
As far as I know, not all of it, but everything that was reachable, let's say, was retrieved. Because as far as I know the story, this Byzantine Institute of America ceased to exist shortly after Whitmore passed away. And the library, the archives, and some collections were transferred to Dumbarton Oaks. And this, with the archive was this manuscript, or at least some part of the manuscript. Also, I know that some pictures and drawings were in Paris and retrieved from there, because Whitmore had also a kind of like an office there of this institute in Paris. So some things were there, some were in USA. So our American colleagues put together everything they could and they sent it to Bulgaria. But as far as I know, it was not everything. The other problem, and this was a huge problem, I'm saying this because I'm working with this manuscript, is that the link between the illustrations and the text was broken. The manuscript was reworked many times by Scorpio and by colleagues in the Institute, because they were preparing it for publishing for many years. And during this process, the original link between pictures, drawings, and text was altered, and a new one was not established. So now we have a pile of pictures and a pile of drawings, and we have the manuscript itself. And even for me, because I know very well the site, even for me, it is difficult to connect everything. Not speaking about the other sites described in the manuscript, because it was not only about Janavara, the manuscript was about many other sites.
How about the Templon? There is a question about the Templon and the reconstruction of the Templon. Have parts of this Templon survived, and what is the reconstruction based on?
Thank you very much for this question. This is a favorite topic for me. Just a second, I'm going back to the reconstruction here. Actually, we have enough pieces to make an almost exact reconstruction of the altar screen or the chancel. It was of the so-called tall or high type, which means that it was not only with small pillars and slabs between them, but there was also an upper part with small columns and a beam on top of the columns. This type of chancel appeared in Constantinople in the first half of the 6th century, or at least this is the common dating for this construction. And it spread from there to regions that were under strong Constantinopolitan influence. We have enough pieces to say that for certain the chancel in Janavara was of this Constantinopolitan type. And here comes the question, the logical question. The church was built earlier. Why the screen was of this type and not the more archaic one without columns? Because I have more tricks in my sleeve. Because the church actually was repaired severely at a certain point in the early 6th century. Something happened. According to some specialists in, just a second to pronounce it, seismology, there was an earthquake in the 6th century that damaged partly the church, so it was repaired. And the floor, they made another floor. So when we excavated the nave, we found remains of 2 floors with marble slabs. Also, this was the moment when they put the mosaics. So the mosaics were not from the original phase. They were from the moment when they repaired the church. That's why I'm very curious someday to take off some of the mosaics at least, and to see what was underneath, because we have some evidence that there were some structures, some water pipes underneath, and I want to explore this, but it is possible only if we remove part of the mosaics. So when the church was repaired, it was decorated very richly. And this was the moment in the 6th century, early 6th century, when they made this marble chancel with the columns. This. If you ask about the other elements of the liturgical arrangement, liturgical installations, I can say that the synthronon was from the original period. We can't say whether it was of this high type with many steps, or it was lower in the beginning, because the high synthronon is typical for the 6th century too. But for certain, the base was from the original phase, because the second floor overlapped the first step of the synthron. So it is for sure. And also, if I develop further this theory about the repairs, I can suggest that the repairs took place in the late 30s, at least in the late 30s, not before that. In a period when the provinces in this part of the Balkans were reformed. And this happened in the time of Justinian the Great, he created a new unit in this part of the empire, the so-called Questura Exercitus. And the center of this unit was in Odessos. And we have a lot of public buildings, including a lot of churches, that have repairs and have new decoration that can be connected with this period. Because in this period, in the late 30s and a little bit after this, the city was funded a lot. A lot of investments were made there because it became the center of this new administrative unit, Questura Exercitus. And also in the same period, the Bishop of Odessus became an archbishop. So he acquired a new rank. So if we connect all these pieces, we can build the hypothesis that the repairs in Janavara took place also in this period. So there was enough funding. So the local Christians commissioned new decoration. And so they not only repaired, but they also redecorated the church and the complex of Janavara.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marina.
Oh, Marina, hello.
This was her question. I will be happy to answer your second question actually after the end of the presentation. And so another question, is the site being identified as a monastery on the assumption that the pilgrimage site needed personnel to manage it, and monastics were the usual caretakers of pilgrimage sites? Or is there more specific evidence of monastic organization and activity?
To be completely honest, I use the term monastery, but I experienced some hard time to believe completely in this term, because for the early Christian period, even 5th and 6th century, still it is very, very difficult to distinguish a real monastery in the way that we imagine it using medieval concepts. Distinguish this kind of monastery from a religious Christian facility with other purposes. This is extremely difficult. Actually, I discussed this topic in a workshop in Sofia with specialists in early Christianity, and the other colleagues agree that this is very difficult. It's very difficult to interpret a facility as a monastery and to be 100% sure. Why? Because the common criteria that we use to identify a facility as a monastery actually come from the Middle Ages. Among them are a clear structure with a courtyard, a main church, and other buildings for living, residential buildings, and also a refectory, a place for cells for the monks, library, scriptorium, etc., etc., etc. So if we study the Middle Ages, it is more or less easy, because if we find such a Christian complex, we have to check: do we have this, and this? If we have at least some of the major elements of the monastery, we can say this is a monastery. Okay, but in early Christianity, it was not so clear, because at this point, monasticism was not so well defined in terms of architecture, planning of the complex, even the church planning, and etc. So it is not a problem only for Janavara. In all cases where we have early Christian complexes like this, with church and some buildings around this, in all these cases, if we don't have any written source mentioning that this particular site was a monastery, we have to keep a question mark in our mind. because we cannot be entirely certain. In the case of Janavara, in the beginning, you saw that it was just the church and two courtyards. One of them probably just, it was used to protect the building, that wall. And the other courtyard was an atrium, which was a very typical element, not only for, not for monasteries, but for any church. It was connected with the liturgy. But then from the second phase on, they started to build different structures connected with the everyday life. That's why I showed you so many finds connected with this everyday life as an evidence that there were people that lived there. Not only they were there not only for the liturgy, not only to maintain the site, but they were living there. They were going for fishing. They were working their land. There was a sickle, so there, and other tools for agriculture. And we have a lot of pottery there. We have these containers for grain. So for certain, people lived there, and that's why we assume that it became a monastery. But again, to be completely honest, we have to keep a question mark because of all these circumstances.
Thank you, Vassil. There are some other questions related to the economy and subsistence of this compound. Is there any evidence that the monks cultivated their own food, or did they rely on donations?
Well, our archaeological evidence is not enough to make such conclusions. But as you see, we have fishermen belongings, we have knives, we have sickles, we have a scissor also, but it was in a very bad state, so that's why I can't show you a picture. We have also what else? Metal tools for working land, but it doesn't mean that it was enough to produce all of their food. So we guess, but it's just a guess, that part of the supplies were imported from the area, probably from the city or from the surroundings. And that's it. I mean, we cannot make very precise conclusions about this.
Thank you. And also some question related to the material evidence, the artifacts found at the site. Okay, an amphora fragment you showed at the end of the presentation, could it be a piece of ostraca?
In what sense?
That's a question of Alessandra Ricci, and maybe this is the piece. Yes. What's your interpretation of this fragment?
Well, usually this is a dipinto. It's an inscription on an amphora or on pottery. Usually these inscriptions were with apotropaic function. They were on amphorae for wine that was a little bit more special, probably wine that was imported to be used in the liturgy. This is a guess. And this is not a unique piece. Actually, even from Varna, we have more pieces from other parts of the region. And there are a lot of dipinti like this from other parts of the Mediterranean. This particular inscription, because of the type of the paint and the shape of letters and the code of the text, according to our colleague Sharankov, all this is typical for Alexandria. So his suggestion was that this amphora with this inscription was imported from Egypt. And because such inscriptions were not used for just ordinary amphora with ordinary wine, so most probably this was some good, special, probably blessed wine imported here for the needs of the church.
Very interesting comment from actually our colleague from Egypt.
Yeah.
The monastery of St. Menes in Mariut, near Alexandria, which was founded around the same period and, funny enough, destroyed around the 7th century. This monastery, St. Menes, was the patron saint of Alexandria. Do we have any information of who was the patron saint of Odessus, or at least of this compound, this church? Okay, first about the patron saint of Odessus, who was it, him or her? And second, do we know the dedication of the church? Who was the patron saint of the church? Do we know something about it?
In my presentation, I explained that we don't have any information about the identity of the saint. We know only that the bones belong to a male, and that's it. According to the style of the reliquary, the gold one, probably the reliquary with the relics were brought from Near East, but it doesn't say much because a lot of saints were actually there, and relics were imported from there to the Balkans. So we can't say who was that saint and who was the patron saint of the facility. As for the city of Odessos, there is a hypothesis, but it's more a historical hypothesis and cannot be supported by archaeology at all. According to this hypothesis, Saint Apostle Andrew came to Odessos in the 1st century, and he founded the first Christian community here. And he ordained the first bishop of Odessos, a certain Amplius, who was the first bishop. So this information came from medieval written sources. And until now, we don't have any, but I really say any piece of information about, archaeological piece of information about Christianity in Odessos and the region before the very end of the 4th and early 5th century. So we have a very long period with no archaeological information at all. And we have this medieval story about St. Andrew passing by Odessos on the way to northern coast of the Black Sea. And according to this source, he founded the community. So if we follow this tradition, we can assume that St. Andrew or St. Amplius were patron saints of Odessos, but we cannot prove it with anything. It has a reflection on the modern Christianity, but this is a totally different matter. In nowadays, the patron saint of Varna saints are the Mother of God and Saint Andrew, and another saint, later saint also. And the cross of Saint Andrew is on the flag of the Metropolitan Bishop of Varna. But this is modern. We don't have any evidence for the period in question.
Can you tell us more about the graves discovered around the church?
The graves around the church. Well, I decided not to put pictures of those graves because I thought that the presentation would be too long. But anyway, we have several graves in the church. I will show you the plan if you wait a second. We don't have a real necropolis. We have several graves. So the most important grave, or it's a tomb actually, this is the tomb in the middle of the church here. Then in the hierarchy of important graves, we have two more that were in the narthex, here and here. Those were graves, not tombs, but graves built with stones and bricks, so pretty well made. According to Scorpio's descriptions, in one of the graves, he found a male and he was holding how's called this a rosary. So he found beads of a rosary near the hand bones of the deceased. Unfortunately, we don't have these artifacts. They're not preserved. I tried to find them in the museum, but nothing. So only a description in one of these graves. So he was saying, oh, this guy had a rosary, so he must be a monk. Then we have several graves in this area behind the church, in this courtyard here. There were three in total, actually four, because to the third of the graves, it was attached a small grave for a small child, not a baby, but a small child. This one here. In these graves, we found them intact, but inside we didn't find anything, any object. They were just with bones, and that's it. So these are all the graves that we have from the monastery, in the monastery. I assume that they belong to special people, even those in the courtyard. And if there was a real necropolis, we have to find it in the future, because it was not in the complex itself. Probably it was somewhere outside in the forest.
Thank you very much. The discussion is going on, and have you heard about the church in Georgia that is relatively similar? We received a note from Salome Meladze from Georgia. This is about the Dolohopi Basilica near the town of Kvareli in Georgia, and discovered in 2004. It isn't called church, but it has the same eastern part of the church, designed more or less like the church here. Have you heard about this? Have you seen this church in? I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but probably Dolohopi Basilica.
I'm not familiar with this particular church, but I've seen several other sites in eastern part of Asia Minor and the Caucasus region, also in northern Syria. Sites where you can find parallels of certain features of the architecture. So I guess that this new site can add some more information about this. So because of this partial parallels with my colleagues, we think that probably there was a kind of Eastern influence to Janavara. But unfortunately, we cannot find an exact parallel. And that's why we are not sure that it was a copy of something from the East. It's more likely to have here some influence, and this influence to be mixed with architectural experiments or something. The big problem in Janavara, actually, is that if you want to make a comparison between different sites, you have to be certain about the sites that you are comparing. So in our case in Janavara, we experience a very hard time reconstructing the building in its upper part. There are several theories. We are working on several theories, and they're very different, really very different. In one of these theories, for example, we are trying to reconstruct it as a really very well fortified building, made to defend itself from attack. The other direction for reconstructing the site is to create a sophisticated upper level with galleries, with connections between the different parts on the second level, and all these sophisticated architectural elements would require walls thick like this on the first level. But this is a totally different direction. And then if you try to reconstruct the upper floor, again, there are several different ways to do it. So when we don't know what exactly was the situation in Odessos, it is very difficult to find the exact parallels elsewhere. Because it is very easy to say, oh, you have an apse that is in the thickness of the eastern wall. So this is an eastern feature. We have it in Syria, Asia Minor, Georgia, Armenia. So it should be from there. Okay, but this is only the ground plan. It is very important to create a credible reconstruction of the second floor and then to search for the parallel. So that's why we experience a lot of difficulties in this respect. I will be very curious to see this new site because I'm collecting all possible parallels, but until now we can't find any exact match.
How about the monasteries around Janavara and around Odessus from the same time period?
Monasteries.
Yeah.
This is another difficult question. Actually, our colleague Alexander Manev recently tried to make a list of all complexes that could be interpreted as monasteries. I'm not sure that he published it. Probably he will publish it. A very useful paper. And there are very few, first, very few. And second, they don't match with each other. I mean, they're very different. Every complex is different from the rest, which means that there was really no standard how to build a monastery. And why there are so few? Not because there were no monks, but because in Bulgaria, I don't know about the other countries around us, but in Bulgaria, for many decades, it was a practice to excavate the church and to leave the rest intact. We have a lot of papers from the last decades about churches, with published churches, and for example, with one sentence, it is said that, oh, and probably there is a complex around it, period. And that's why we don't have archaeological information to make a better comparison between the different facilities. You're muted.
Thank you, Vassil. I'm sorry. Another interesting question. So I will read first the note of Nikolai Sharankov, the epigraphist who helped you decipher the text on the amphora fragment. The amphora was not for wine, but for oil, probably some special oil used in church service. The inscription, after the typical Christian formula, some of them coded with numbers 484 equal to Tel, 99 equal to Amin, mentions the word for oil, eleo, and then the quantity in sextari. There are many parallels from the lower Danube lands, but they are usually written in red ink, while those with black ink are typical for Egypt. And this was very helpful explanation and note on the comment about the fragment, I think. But there is an interesting question now about the complex. Could the whole complex be investigated within the context of information concerning the entire policy of Justinian I towards the Syriac monophysites? I mean, do you make any connection? Can we relate the Janavara hill compound with the policy of Justinian towards the monophysites in the 6th century? You know, there was a very hostile governmental policy. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, of course. First, it is great that Nikolai joined the discussion, and give us again this information, because everything that I know about this inscription actually is from his analysis. So here you have the full analysis. Speaking about the content of the amphora, I don't argue that it was wine. If he has, if he thinks that it can be for oil, okay. It doesn't change the main thing that it was for a special liquid used for religious purposes, and not just a container for wine or just a container for oil. So this is great that we have the opportunity to hear the interpretation directly from Nikolai. As for the monophysites, this is an old theory. My colleague Alexander Minchev used to support it a lot before. Now, not so much, because we collected more information. But still, this is a theory that should be mentioned. Because of the parallels, even though partial parallels, from the Near East, some scholars, including Minchev, thought that we can make a connection between those provinces and Odessos, and because we have historical evidence of immigrants from there to the Black Sea coast and Odessos precisely, so we can build a second hypothesis on top of this, that some of these immigrants decided to build a secluded facility to practice their type of Christianity. In addition to this, elaborating on the theory about the monophysites, some other scholars launched this idea. There are even some papers that this monastery was built in the 6th century. It was connected with the royal family in the time of Justinian, and even that Theodora, the empress, a hidden monophysite, was funding actually the construction of this complex. As I remember, Pavel Georgiev had a paper about this. So all these monophysite theories have one weak spot. The problem is that we don't have any direct evidence that any heretic community was connected with this church and this complex. Furthermore, I spent a lot of time explaining about the location, how it was visible from everywhere, etc., etc., etc. You have to agree that it is completely not logical to move a certain heretic group from one place to another, and this group to build their complex on such spot that can be visible from everywhere, especially from the Orthodox city of Odessos, because we have historical records about the orthodoxy of the bishops of Odessos. Some of them participated to the councils, the church councils, so we know about this. So that's why it is not logical to assume that this facility was something else than mainstream Christian. Second, of course, there were immigrants from the East. This was not so special, but we don't have information, specific information, that they were organized in a separate community and that they wanted to do something especially for them. We just don't have information about this. And the third thing, this is my own research. It is connected with the liturgical installations in the church. The church itself, inside, no matter of the old architecture, inside the church was designed in a very, very how to say, Constantinopolitan way. I mean, there was nothing odd in the organization of the space. The shape of the altar, the place of the altar table, the shape of the synthronon, the shape of the chancel, the place of the ambo, everything was so Constantinopolitan. And that's why I personally can't see anything that can support scientifically any connection between this facility and the monophysites. If there was such a connection, we have to find some kind of evidence. Until now, we don't have such evidence. So it is merely a theory, even I can say a hypothesis.
Thank you very much, Vassil. This was the last among the questions. So I would like to thank you first, and I would like to thank the audience and everyone who was so actively participating in the discussion. Hopefully this is going to bring more attention to the topic you're exploring, and probably you can mention something about the publication you're preparing.
Yes, this famous publication, it is not mine. We are working with this. We are working on this publication with Alexander Minchev, with the help of some other colleagues, working on specific materials. And hopefully the first volume dedicated to the church itself will be ready by the end of this year. And we hope that if this happens, the next volume that will be dedicated to the complex around it and to the specific materials like pottery, coins, marbles, etc., will be ready in the end of the next year. And we hope to publish this online with the help of the Balkan Heritage Foundation. So it is again one of our joint projects. I think it's logical because in the last year we work. The Museum of Varna works together with the Balkan Heritage Foundation. We explore this together.
Thank you very much. And hopefully the season at Janavara will be resumed with Balkan Heritage Field School again in 2022. If the pandemic is over, hopefully by the end of this year, at least in some parts of the world. And here I would like to invite all of our attendees to join us with the BEMA seminars again on the 10th of April, when the topic will be dedicated to the Black Sea underwater archaeology. So if you're interested in that kind of things and that kind of topics, more news from the area of the southern Bulgarian Black Sea coast, together with our colleague, Dr. Naiden Prakov, who is the director of the Center for Underwater Archaeology, on the 10th of April. Stay tuned with us. We are going to send a notice. Thank you very much, Vassil, and thank you everyone for the support and interest joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much to you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So,
bye, Misha.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you from Canada.
have a nice weekend. It's starting now in Canada. Half of hour is over.
So we definitely can stay a little bit more and say cheers to everyone.
Oh, I have a glass. Yes, this belongs.
Okay.
Cheers from Varna.
I'm going to bring a beer. Cheers, guys.
And the ones who stayed can join us for a just glass of wine, or at least in Bulgaria is late Saturday evening, so it's nearly 10 o'clock, and it's time for just a friendly talk. Caroline, you're welcome. I see Buyan, Teresa, and other guests. So if you're up to a glass of wine, you're welcome.
I'm afraid I have to go, so cheers from me, and have a nice part of the day in your country. So
Thank
bye
you.
bye.
Thank you very much, Vassil. It's great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye, Vassil.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I'm still here.
Buyan, are you around?
Yeah, I'm around.
I can hear your voice, but cannot see you.
After a little while, you'll see me.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting and informative to us as well. Not only to the people interested in late antiquity and early Christian archaeology, but that was a good one. Thank you very much for the support. I mean, Bogdan, Luba, Barbara, Angela, and the other colleagues who made this BEMA lecture successful.
I actually really enjoyed the lecture. It was a flashback for me because actually I wrote my bachelor's thesis on churches, and this was one of the churches I wrote about. So to see so much new information uncovered since then, it's been really fascinating. So it was a pleasure, really.
Yeah. And hopefully by the beginning of the next lecture, we can have the registration form operating. So this will be a kind of a little advance. And for the colleagues from the new Bulgarian University, we received an invitation from your colleague from the Department for Continuing Education for a meeting probably in the forthcoming weeks and talking about the BEMA seminars.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Great.
that's very nice.
Great.
Yeah. And how are you doing, actually, guys?
Boyan is back from survey.
Lecturing, writing, habilitation, and so on.
How was the survey? I'm sorry, we can still keep the conversation going in English because of some guests.
Yeah, there are some
guests may join us.
other guys, English speakers. The weather was very nice. Cool and rainy. Cool and rainy. But actually, this season we have spotted more than 50 sites, new sites.
Amazing.